Hey guys, Whitney here. Welcome to the Passive Investing Made Simple show. I'm your host, Whitney Elkins-Hutten. I am joined here today by one of our managing partners and founders, Danny Randazzo. But if this is your first time joining, welcome. We do this live show every Tuesday to help you learn about the ins and outs of passive investing so you can go into your first or next deal with confidence. So make sure to join us at passiveinvestingwithwhitney.com. There you can get access to an ebook to help you understand this world of passive investing. You can also get access to our masterclass sessions, our boot camps, and our open deals. And if you didn't catch that website, it's passiveinvestingwithwhitney.com. Guys, I am so excited today to have Danny joining us today because we are going to actually take a little bit of a left-hand turn and talk about how to invest with your kids. Danny, welcome.
Thank you, Whitney. I'm very excited to be here. As you know, I love this topic. It's just close to my heart and excited to get started and talk about, passive investing for kids and kind of financial lessons and other things like that.
Well, before we dive in, for those of you who don't know you, let's just take a couple minutes and, help people understand who is Danny and what your role is here at passiveinvesting.com.
Perfect. I am Danny Randazzo, one of the managing partners at passiveinvesting.com. Prior to starting the company alongside Dan, I was a former financial consultant. So I traveled quite a bit. I was typically in a hotel, maybe 200 plus nights a year, 150,000 miles in an airplane, going around the US and even going abroad and living abroad. To help multi-billion-dollar companies improve their financial performance. So both of the things I learned from doing that job and being in that was twofold. Number one, I was not in control of my own time. I was, traveling a lot, exchanging that for a paycheck. But the flip side, I got a ton of great experience managing and understanding how can be optimized for ultimately cash flow and revenue performance. So benefits, some negatives to it, and that really drove me to putting my personal equity to work to generate cash flow to ultimately replace my W-2 job and ultimately started this business. And I think to date, we've got a little over $1.5 billion in assets under management. We buy, multifamily communities across the Southeast U.S. We have a hotel in the Southeast U.S. We have express car washes across the Southeast U.S. We've got self-storage facilities across the country. We've got a lending business that lends predominantly in the fix and flip space in the Southeast U.S., and our business model is pretty simple. And I kind of take things back to explaining it to, a kindergartner or a first grader. The concepts of investing should remain pretty basic and pretty fundamental. So I say we invest and do business quite a bit in the Southeast US, but realistically, we're doing business in the best cities and the best parts of those cities in the Southeast US. And so our basic fundamental principles of having job growth, population growth, typically doing business in high income type areas, it gives us a good fundamental base to have a high probability of a good outcome. And those are kind of the core principles. So within the business, taking it one step further, I predominantly oversee all of the acquisition, the asset management, the underwriting, the finance side of the operations. And then, Dan really oversees kind of the marketing, the investor relations side. And we've got a great team of people, check us out, passiveinvesting.com. see the team. Whitney's been such an integral part of our educational and investor relations platform. So we really pride ourselves on having good communication, but also all of this free educational content. One of the core principles when we got started in the business was really just to help others know that this type of investing is even possible. I grew up reading and kind of studying all about Wall Street and the stock market, and I really am passionate about trying to share the message with everyday people that institutional investing is possible for the everyday person. And that's really what we do at passiveinvesting.com. So it's a lot of those things that Wall Street doesn't tell you, that the select few who kind of control the investing space don't want a lot of people to know about. And that's why we just try to share and give everything away for free. So whether you want to actively do your own deals or passively invest with us, we're just here to help the greater good and help everybody be better with their own personal investments, whether that's with us or on your own. There's just a ton of tips and tricks to help people be more effective, get better results, and ultimately protect the money that we all individually work so hard for. And that was one of the integral lessons that I learned very early on, of exchanging time for money. I was the kid in the neighborhood who had every, small business under the sun. I did landscaping in the summers. I moved sand and cleaned up beaches in the spring and the fall for people on the lakes. I grew up in Michigan. And in the winters, I did snow removal and, painting odd jobs. I was able to do it. And if I didn't know how to do it, I would just go learn it and figure it out. I repaired someone's sprinkler irrigation system when I was like 13 years old and just kind of figured it out as I went. And ultimately, I knew like I could get the sprinkler to cover and shoot water, then I've done a pretty good job. So it was kind of like a pass fail, or really more like fail, fail, fail. And finally I got it working and it was a pass. So, we're just here to help people and, share what we know and how to be better financial stewards for us and the next generation that follows.
Well, let's talk about that next generation. You have two little ones at home. I have one. And, a question that I often get, especially when I'm at in-person events, people are like, what do you do? What's your philosophy around money and how are you teaching your kids? Now that's a huge question, but let's kind of break that down. What is your objective with teaching your kids about money? Like, are you, how are you helping them orient to, what money is and how it's used in the world?
Well, I will take that to a more general philosophy. My kids are still a little bit young, but reading to them, sharing books, being transparent. I remember kind of growing up, and money was one of those like taboo conversations at the dinner table. There was always some sort of like angst about it of, did one parent buy a couple of things they shouldn't have, or, were we going to cancel the cable bill so the kids played outside, but we could also save money? But it was never like fully transparent of like, hey, family, here's the situation. Here's how much comes in. Here's how much goes out. And here's what we do. So it was always a little bit weird. So step one, don't make it weird. Just talk about it. It's a very normal thing. Even with our youngest, we'll go out. We typically walk every morning, and 9 out of 10 walks, I will find money on the street. And it's like a quarter here. We found $7 the other day. So it was a huge day for us. It was very exciting. But that sort of conversation with them and like the exchange of money for goods is, the basic fundamentals I think you need to start to have. So as they're younger, talking about it, I actually wrote 2 children's books just about money and counting. So those are great resources. There's a ton of other good kids' books out there just to kind of talk about money, talk about business. One of the fan favorites right now is a Reese Witherspoon book. It's called Busy Betty. And Betty has to wash her dog prior to her friend coming over. And long story short, the friend and Betty end up starting their own dog washing business in the book. And so I think those things are really great for kids to understand, just about the different ways that there are to make money or how money is exchanged. Because that's all money is. It's a tool to exchange a good and service for something else.
I love that. And I think for me, like growing up, I even have to back up the conversation a little bit more. You talk about, don't make money weird in your house. My father was the breadwinner and he came home, he spent the money. My mom, very different, grew up differently with money in different relationship. It was all about financial security. So they would sit down at the dinner table, and it was totally weird, right? Because one of it came at what really the conversation centered around like how could we be more secure. The other one was around like, how can we use money to better our lives? But there's this happy middle of how to be good stewards with your money, and I think that's really where you're landing on, is how can you start from your young age to teach your children how to be a good steward? Because it really is a tool, right? And all of that mindset comes beforehand. And, I love how you phrase it. Just don't make it weird, like being transparent, right?
Totally.
So like, what are some of your like overarching strategies? And I know your kids are young now, but like forward thinking, like, how do you see this conversation growing, right? Like you're teaching your kids how to, the value of $1, that exchange of time or service for $1. But like, how do you see that growing? How do you see layering on these skills as they get older?
I think number one, the first kind of foundational element that every single person, whether you're an adult or a kid, you need to understand the value of $1. And that is absolutely one of the most impactful ways to learn the value of $1 is either through manual labor or a service job, which could be in like food and bev or, working at a golf course, interacting with people, some sort of service related job where you're forward facing with the customer and getting feedback and learning that. Food and bev is notoriously challenging, and manual labor is also, physically exhausting work. And so I think every person out there needs to be in that role and take that job at some point in their life in order to truly learn what the value of $1 is. I see a lot of people who may be, in their early working years who, didn't really have a job in high school, didn't really have a job in college, kind of got a good job coming out of college working, for like general office work on the computer, kind of sitting in the chair, kind of checking Facebook or, texting, not a hard job, which manual labor is a hard job. Food and bev is a hard job. Any sort of service job, hard job. You learn how much effort goes into 1 hour of work and what you get for, $20 an hour for that. And for me, I learned that lesson. I was probably about 10 10 years old, and I would take wheelbarrows full of sand, and I would push these wheelbarrows that probably weighed 2 or 3 times my body weight down a hill, and have to like balance it going all the way down from the driveway a couple hundred yards to the beach, dumping it, going back up and scooping in the hot summer days. Excruciating work, exhausting work. I would do that work. I would make some money. And then, I would then question myself on, am I really going to spend this hard-earned money on a new hat or, a fancy pair of shoes for school? My parents never, they always provided the essentials. Always, we had food on the table, everything like that. But if there was something extra above and beyond, it was, my own effort to go out and exchange my time for money to go and buy that. And inevitably, if I wanted something, I would go and work for it. And by the time that work was done, I was like, boy, oh boy, I worked pretty hard for this. I don't really want this fancy pair of rollerblades or this extra special hockey stick. I'm fine with the basics because it's more in line with the price point I want to be at, because I know how hard it is to work for $20. And so I think if people don't do that, you are severely limited in your psychological understanding of what $20 actually means. So that would be a foundational lesson.
Awesome. So I like it. Like essentially like understanding work, developing work ethic, but the true value of what it takes to earn that dollar. We had a little bit of a lesson in that just a few weeks ago. We were, trying to do spring cleaning, and I was like, my daughter, she's 10 going on 11. This is before, when we were talking about how she broke her hand. This is before she broke her hand. So for those of you who know that she has broken her hand, I did not make her clean windows or clean the gutters, scale a ladder with a broken hand. But long story short, I said it, here are all the chores that need to be done around the house. Here's the value. Normally she would go for the easy ones, like raking the yard, 50 cents or whatever. And she picked up, we needed all the windows cleaned inside and out. And I told her I would pay her more if she did that, but it was going to take longer and it was going to be harder work. And she did it. And then all she wanted was, I think, a Harry Potter Lego set at the end of the day. She needed enough money for that. And when she finished, exactly what you just said, she didn't spend the money on it. She was like, I worked too hard for this. Like, why am I going to give it away? It was amazing.
Well, and that's the second point from a foundational perspective. She wanted the Harry Potter set. The window cleaning was the task. And the important lesson here is that you gave her the money for it. And if she was going to go and buy the Lego set, I think it's very important for that child to take the money in their hand and then physically go to the store and pay it out from their, person in their hands. Too many times I see people where it's like, hey, go clean the car and then I'll take you, for the ice cream that you want. But give them the money and let them take that money and spend it if they want. Or like you said, they're going to learn that level of effort is, challenging to clean all those windows. And the Lego set is, at the end of the day, not really worth the exchange of all of that effort they just put in. So that happens, I think, more often than not when you go through that manual labor type position or that service related position.
So if, doing the manual labor is first and then putting the money in the child's hands, so they are actually transacting, not only learning how to transact, but they have to actually, they physically part with their hard earnings. What would be the third step?
The third step would be kind of compounding on that. So once they, exchange their time for the money, they realize, hey, I've got the money, I don't really want to spend it. Then you can start to talk about maybe that third step of either investing it or having it work for you in some capacity. And it doesn't have to be ultra complicated. One example that I actually did when I was younger, when I was probably 12 or 13, we had a huge garage sale once a year. And the first year we did the garage sale, I also sold coffee and donuts. And at the end of the sale, like with my little table and section that I had, I made more money from the coffee and donuts. And so the following year, I completely scrapped selling any of my stuff. I just donated the things I didn't want. And I expanded to have hot dogs, sandwiches, coffee, donuts, sodas, and dominated the garage sale. I had more sales than the rest of my family combined. And so the next year I upped it even more. I took my money and went to the grocery store and bought, lemonade now. I had different snacks. I had like goldfish bags, Lay's potato chip bags, the little sandwich bags. Sausages were added in addition to the hot dogs. And so that would be step 3, either investing it or having it multiply, because that's the fundamental lesson that we're all after, of having learned how hard you work for money, then having your money work for you in a pretty basic fashion. So it could be, have them go to the store, buy the lemonade mixes. You're going to be spending, maybe $10, but realistically, they should be able to go and sell, $30 worth of cups of lemonade somewhere, or, go buy the ingredients to make cookies and sell the cookies, for $2 a bag to the neighbors, or, do a small investment. I actually, when I got a little bit older, my parents realized that I always had cash on hand. And so there were times where it was like, hey, Danny, can we borrow $20 for pizza tonight? And I was like, sure, I can borrow you the $20, but, by the end of the week, return to me 20 and give me $2 extra, and we've got a deal. And so just those basic lessons, I think there's a ton of creativity to that, that starts early. One thing that Dan does with his kids, they're a little bit older. They're kind of like middle school, early high school age. For, some of their birthdays or holidays, they get money from aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, whatever. And their kids have been able to, I see the comment in there, the loan shark, it was just common sense to me. I just had the money because I was constantly coming up with new, creative, odd jobs around the neighborhood to make money. And so I literally always had cash on hand, and my parents did not have cash on hand. And so it was just a happy way to kind of make things go around in the household. There was a need for it. I filled the need and got some return on that. Dan's kids saved their money, and he will let them, invest in a deal alongside him. So if they have, $500 saved up or something, he'll put them into one of the multifamily deals or into our lending business, and they'll actually track the distributions and track the investment on their little spreadsheet. However, just to get them introduced to the concept. And so the best one is, recently we started acquiring the express car wash facilities. We've got probably about 10 or so locations in the Columbia area. And a couple of Dan's kids are investors in those car washes. And so, anytime they go by the site, he always lets them out, and they'll pick up any trash around the site because they're an investor in it. They're an owner in it. And it's just a great concept to start, whenever they're ready, and, understand how hard you work for money, make the good decisions to not spend it on frivolous things. And then step 3 is have it start working for you in a basic, comfortable fashion. And then I think, step 4 would be you can certainly kick it up a notch or two into different investing realms or different ideas too.
Awesome. So just in the time that we have left, I want to make sure you touched on a few books earlier that the one book with Reese Witherspoon, Busy Betty. Do you have any other books or games, podcasts, resources that you tap into with your kids, or you plan on doing so with your kids?
Monopoly is a great game.
Our daughter, we played it 2 nights ago. She crushed us. It was the first time that she figured out how to be both mom and dad handedly at Monopoly.
Yeah, Monopoly is excellent. I think it's, a fundamental principle too. And I always remember back in the day, I would just try to get hotels so quick on that. And it really makes me think about being in the multifamily space nowadays, because the couple of little houses on the board don't yield the same rent that you can charge when someone lands on your piece, but having the hotel there is big money. And so, that scalability of a few houses into the hotel. Another important one, in Monopoly is, buying some properties on the same street, kind of having a little monopoly going of that part of the road or the corner of the board. So those fundamental concepts are really important. I think they speak to how business is done. So, what I mean by that is if you have a really good market that and understand, buying several properties in one market is a great way to kind of compound on that basic fundamental philosophy of knowing it well and being invested in there and having some more scalability to it. So a lot of times we'll own multiple properties within a pretty close geographical region. And if we don't have a unit available at property A, we can send them over to property B and kind of keep both performing really well. Another one that is a good game, I think, the Robert Kiyosaki, I think Cash Flow Quadrant, pretty good game there. My books that I wrote, they're available on Amazon. If you just Google my name or something, we can put links in there. Those are good early concept books. I would say, age group kind of 5 and under, but really, fundamental principles, good little picture books and lessons there. There was another really good board game that a friend sent me. I'm going to get the name of it wrong. Something Train, I believe. Does that jog a memory for you, Whitney?
No, we've always played Cash Flow for kids. That's what we started off with in our household. And interestingly enough, we started playing when she was about 3. And I'm like, if she can just nail down an asset and a liability, and those are the only 2 words that she fundamentally kind of understands, I have won, at least for the next few years. And so that's an amazing, I don't think there's any age really too young to start playing Cash Flow for kids, but that was a fun game. And it kept us from, going to the store and buying, 20 Barbies or like a new toy every time we went for the store, because she knew the difference between an asset and a liability. Now, guys, I don't deprive my child. Grandma and grandpa, they take good care of her. So she's getting some of those, some perks. And now that she's older, she's utilizing her own money to invest or snag the things that she wants.
Totally. I think the fundamental lesson of an asset and a liability is absolutely critical. One that a lot of people, tend to get wrong is car, right? A lot of people put a car in the asset column. And it's definitely a liability, right? It loses value over time. It costs money to upkeep. A car, most cars on the planet do not appreciate. Ticket to Ride, thank you. I was just Googling that. I did find Ticket to Ride. I was going to get to that. But Kriani, thank you very much. Ticket to Ride is a good one. The asset and liability piece is absolutely critical. And just the basic grid, I think Rich Dad, Poor Dad has a great little one-page grid of assets, liabilities, and then income and expenses, and how the basic arrows kind of feed together. And so I always think about, if I'm having a conversation and if I can explain something to a first grader and they understand it, then I've done a good job, because it should be that basic. It should be that simple and straightforward. Nothing overcomplicated, nothing crazy. Money principles should be very basic. And I can't stress that enough. So I feel like if it's, too confusing, too detailed, you're going to get lost in translation.
Mm. Well, to tag on to some of the games, and honestly, we play Catan in our household. We play Seven Wonders. So those are games that kind of put in that kind of Monopoly category. I had never thought of Ticket to Ride. We play that all the time. That is another, kind of skill building, game as well. Now, are there any, we talked about the children's books, as your kids get older, are there any other books that you would, probably put on the table? I know one for us, we sat down last year and read The Richest Man in Babylon together. And really, it was that third section where it just, like you said, simplistic language just lays out the kind of the 10 commandments with money. Like I said, right now she's nailing the first 5 or 6. So are there any other books that you would suggest for parents that might be listening here today?
I think just having the exposure to the books is important. At the end of the day, every individual person is different. And you and I could read the exact same book and take 2 totally different lessons away from it. I think with any sort of financial book, or, business related book, I think you're going to take away, 2, 3, maybe 4 things from that book, but the words may hit you differently at different times. And so I think having a variety of books, and letting kids pick and choose kind of what they're interested in is very important, because just like us as adults, we're interested in slightly different books than others. Some may really want to go into the nuances of taxes, while others want to go into, business performance and multifamily optimization, whatever kind of, specific areas that's important. I think from a fundamental perspective, I personally, and everyone is different, I personally liked the stories and more biographies, kind of autobiographies of people. So for me, sharing a story of Phil Knight and Nike through his book Shoe Dog, a great little concept there. Think and Grow Rich, again, great concepts. I think the messages hit people at different times when they are ready, willing, and able to receive the message. And each message could be different. So I hope that my kids will pick up all of the books that I have, accumulated during my time and pick a few things out of them that are very advantageous. But I think, just the family time of sitting down and saying, hey, tonight we're going to listen to one chapter from this book and have a little discussion around it. I think that is that action is what is going to get people more comfortable with money and ultimately thinking about money on their own terms.
Awesome. Just a wealth of information here, guys. If you're just joining, be sure to, one, listen to the replay. Two, rewind the last 10 minutes because it was pure gold. I know I learned a lot of new tips and tricks on how to introduce money concepts to my kids. Now, Danny, as we wrap up, what is one takeaway that you'd like the listeners to get from today's conversation?
The biggest takeaway is everyone is a little bit different. The timing of when you start to learn about money, the experiences that you're around are really what's going to drive your psychology and belief system around money. So I think having a very open kind of family table and discussion of, how money works and, what things cost is important for, all age groups to understand. And hey, if a kid wants to go to an overnight camp and it's, $500 to go and do this, put them to work washing your windows to earn $500, and then they can go and, pay the bill, or they can, fill out a check and put it with the slip, and they can go and mail it in to actually show that exchange of money. So I think that would just be the main takeaway of, meeting everyone on their own terms, because everyone is going to be just a little bit different with where they're at in life, what their experiences are, and then just being open with it, having conversations about it. It shouldn't be some weird taboo thing. I think, it should just be everyday practice, because ultimately, every person probably uses money every single day to exchange for something.
Awesome. Well, Danny, before we start our Ask Me Anything session, where can listeners find you?
The easiest way, check us out, passiveinvesting.com, profiles there, or, team is there, whatever you need. Just go to passiveinvesting.com.
Awesome. Well, if you're here live, don't go anywhere. We're about to start our Ask Me Anything session.